The room fell silent the moment a billionaire's mocking laughter was cut short by a 10-year-old waitress's daughter. A 10-year-old girl, the daughter of a poor waitress, was suddenly asked to read aloud in front of a hall full of powerful men. What happened next silenced the entire room. She wasn't supposed to be there, just a servant's child, invisible among polished boots and polished words. But when an ancient document surfaced, filled with secrets no one else could untangle, all eyes turned to her. Some laughed, others doubted. One man even sneered, ready to watch her fail. But what they didn't know was that Anna had been listening all her life, listening more closely than anyone ever imagined. That night, her quiet voice would expose truths that many wished to keep buried, and nothing in that hall would ever be the same. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. She walked among the wealthy unseen, a child of 10, carrying silence like armor in a noisy hall. The dining hall of the Edelhoff Grand Hotel glowed with crystal chandeliers and silver cutlery. Guests in pressed suits and satin dresses leaned over tables, speaking in low tones that hummed like bees around a hive. Waiters in black vests moved quickly, balancing trays heavy with porcelain plates and polished glasses. In a quiet corner, Anna Bergman, 10 years old, sat with her back straight and her hands folded neatly on her lap. Blonde hair brushed her shoulders, combed carefully by her mother that morning. Her shoes were plain, polished until they almost shone, though the leather was thin from wear. No one looked at her. She was only the waitress's daughter. Her mother, Marta Bergman, wove between tables with the grace of long practice. She wore her uniform, a white blouse buttoned to the throat, a dark skirt reaching below her knees, and a small apron tied tightly around her waist. Though her face showed lines of fatigue, her posture remained proud. She carried trays without a tremor, even when the load was heavy. Anna's world was sound and detail. She noticed the scrape of a chair leg on marble, the faint strain in her mother's smile when a guest snapped impatiently for more wine, the soft thud of a folded bill slipped beneath a plate. She saw all this, but no one saw her. When guests brushed past, their eyes slid over her as if she were part of the wallpaper. A boy her age walked by once, his pockets jingling with coins, and didn't meet her gaze. To them, she was a shadow. Still, she sat with quiet dignity. She held a small book in her lap, not a storybook, but an old phrasebook of languages her grandfather had once owned. The edges were frayed, the ink faded, but she traced the letters with her fingertip as though they were treasures. Her lips moved without sound, repeating words in German, French, and Latin. Her mother noticed, just briefly. Marta's eyes softened as she passed by with another tray, but she said nothing. Words were scarce during working hours. For Anna, silence was her shield. If she spoke, she risked drawing notice. If she stayed quiet, the world passed her by. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a tension coiled, the kind that waits, patient but certain, for the right moment to break free. The hall remained busy, the air thick with perfume and pride. Anna sat still, invisible among the shining silver and polished stone. And so began the day that would not let her remain unseen. The rhythm of the hotel carried on, steady as a drumbeat, until a small ripple disturbed its flow. Morning gave way to afternoon, and the Edelhoff Grand settled into its steady rhythm. The clatter of cutlery softened, replaced by murmured conversation and the faint notes of piano drifting from the lobby. The hotel had its patterns, like the tide, arrivals, meals, departures, each flowing into the other. Anna remained at her mother's side, but always slightly behind, like a shadow too polite to fall across the light. When Marta slipped into the kitchen, Anna followed, waiting on a wooden stool by the back wall. No one addressed her directly. A few of the staff nodded at her politely, the way one nods to a passing stranger. "Quiet girl," one of the older waiters whispered once, stacking plates with weary hands. "Doesn't cause trouble." And then he turned away, forgetting her in the same breath. At one table near the windows, a pair of businessmen in dark suits spoke over contracts. One dropped his pen, and before the waiter reached down, Anna had already picked it up and placed it gently back on the linen. "Thank you." The man muttered without looking at her. His eyes stayed on the page, already elsewhere. It was always like this. People noticed the act, not the person. Anna accepted it. She had learned to read people's posture more than their words. She knew when a smile was forced, when a laugh carried weight, when silence pressed heavier than speech. She folded these small lessons into herself like threads, weaving them carefully, waiting. Her mother carried the burden of presence. Marta's movements carried dignity, though her uniform was plain and her hands bore the faint scars of years with boiling pots and sharp glass. She brushed past Anna once, adjusting her daughter's collar in a fleeting gesture of care before disappearing again through the crowd. It was enough. That quiet touch was a reminder. I see you, even if no one else does. Anna returned to her book. A waiter passed behind her with a tray of steaming cups, the air briefly filled with roasted coffee and sugar. She traced the German phrase for truth with her finger, then the French word for silence. She whispered them both under her breath. Life in the hotel flowed on, unbroken. The guests spoke, the staff served, the world turned. Nothing seemed unusual, and yet, a small shift was already beginning, almost too slight to notice. A voice carried across the room, foreign to the ear and sharp against the calm, and Anna lifted her head for the first time that day. The voice came sharp across the lobby. A tall man in a navy suit stood at the reception desk, his silver cufflinks flashing as he gestured impatiently. His words were clipped, broken, each one strained. Room, key wrong, he said in German, his accent heavy. The young clerk fumbled, trying to answer politely. But the sentences tangled, half correct, half confused. The more the clerk stumbled, the louder the guest grew. Guests nearby turned their heads, forks paused in midair. Anna, still seated near the wall, lifted her eyes. She recognized something beneath his fractured German. His rhythm, his vowels, they carried another tongue. Hungarian. She had heard it long ago at her grandfather's table, a language of old songs and faded stories. The clerk's face reddened. The guest tapped the counter with his knuckles. Not right. Not right. He barked again in broken German, his voice rising in frustration. From across the room, Marta froze mid-step. She balanced a tray in her hands, but her eyes had already found Anna. A flicker of warning passed in her gaze. Stay back. Don't draw attention. But Anna slid from her stool and stepped forward, small and steady. Her blonde hair caught the light as she came to stand beside the counter, barely tall enough to see over it. She spoke softly, in Hungarian this time, though the words were clear. I think the key is not for your room, sir. May I help translate? The room stilled. The man turned, startled, his mouth shut mid-protest. His eyes, sharp and impatient only a moment ago, widened as they fell upon the child. Anna repeated, slower, her voice even. She pointed gently at the brass number etched into the key, then to the register lying open before the clerk. With calm precision, she explained in Hungarian, each word carefully chosen. The man's shoulders eased. His frown softened into reluctant surprise. He nodded once, then again, his voice quieter when he answered. In less than a minute, the confusion untangled. He took the correct key from the clerk, bowed slightly toward Anna, and left without another word. The clerk stared, bewildered. Around the lobby, guests whispered, their curiosity stirring like wind through tall grass. Anna stepped back, folding her hands in front of her once more. Her face betrayed nothing. To her, it was simply speaking words she had carried quietly for years. But her mother stood frozen across the room, pride and fear braided together in her stillness. The day's rhythm resumed, yet something had shifted. The quiet child had been seen, if only for a moment. From his corner table, a man had been watching. He was older, in his late 60s, his frame tall but lean, dressed in a dark suit that fit without effort. His hair, silver at the temples, caught the light as he raised his glass. His name was Herr Dietrich Keller, a German industrialist known among the wealthy guests for his fortune and sharper tongue. When the confusion at the reception began, he had looked up only briefly, irritation flashing across his eyes at the disruption. But when the little girl walked forward and spoke, something in his posture shifted. He set his glass down, very slowly. The others saw only a child's trick, a fortunate coincidence, perhaps, but Keller leaned back in his chair, studying her with narrowed focus. His gaze followed the way she stood, how her shoulders didn't tremble, how her voice didn't stumble. A 10-year-old, correcting a grown man in front of strangers. He watched how she folded her hands again when it was finished. Not with pride, not with the restless fidget of a child eager for praise. It was too measured, too calm. Across the room, Marta Bergman felt the weight of eyes. She glanced once toward Keller, then away, her jaw tightening. She knew men like him, men who noticed too much. Anna returned quietly to her stool by the wall, lifting her worn phrasebook again. To any passerby, it looked as though she had never moved. But Keller didn't look away. His gaze lingered, like a hawk circling something small but unexpected. Guests resumed their meals. The hum of conversation returned. But an undercurrent had been set. The incident was already being whispered about among the tables. The waitress's child. Did you hear? She spoke like a scholar. Strange, isn't it? Keller lifted his glass again, though he did not drink. His lips pressed thin, as though holding back a thought not yet ready to be spoken. Marta caught sight of him again as she passed with another tray. Her hand gripped the edge tighter than necessary. A mother's instinct pricked. Her daughter had stepped into the open, and someone important had taken notice. Anna, unaware of the eyes fixed on her, turned the page of her book. Her lips moved soundlessly, repeating the words she traced with her finger. To her, it was simply habit. To others, it was beginning to look like something more. The air of the hall felt altered, if only slightly. The attention that once slid past her so easily had begun to circle back. And one man, at least, was no longer pretending not to see. The evening meal drew closer. Candles flickered to life on each table, the golden light softening the sharp edges of glass and silver. Guests leaned closer over their dinners, their voices blending into a low, steady current. Her Dietrich Keller rose from his table. His movement was unhurried, yet it carried the weight of authority. Conversations near him quieted for a moment as he passed. He walked with a cane of polished wood, though he did not lean heavily upon it. It was less for need, more for statement. Anna looked up from her book when his shadow fell across her. "Young lady," he said in German, his voice smooth but edged with curiosity. "That was not an ordinary thing you did." Anna's eyes lifted to his, calm and steady. Her hands remained folded over the worn phrasebook. She spoke simply. It was just words. "My grandfather taught me when I was small." Keller tilted his head, studying her. Hungarian words, spoken without error. And not common ones either. His mouth curved, though not into a smile. Children do not learn such things by chance. From across the hall, Marta appeared with another tray, setting it carefully at a table, but her gaze never left her daughter. Her jaw tightened as Keller leaned slightly closer. "Do you often help strangers like that?" Keller asked. Anna shook her head. "No, I only speak when needed." The simplicity of her answer seemed to weigh more heavily than a long speech. Keller's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in thought, as if testing the edge of a blade. A waiter passed nearby, glancing nervously at the scene, but Keller dismissed him with a small wave. His focus stayed fixed on the girl. "You hide your knowledge well," he murmured. His tone was not cruel, but probing, the way one might test the grain of wood for weakness. Anna lowered her gaze briefly, then lifted it again. "Not hiding," she said softly. "Just waiting." The silence that followed seemed to stretch, thick as smoke. A guest at the next table shifted in his chair, sensing something but not daring to intrude. At last, Keller straightened, his cane tapping once against the marble floor. "Then perhaps it is time you are asked to speak again." His eyes flicked briefly toward Marta, acknowledging the mother before turning back to the daughter. "I would like you to come upstairs," he said, his voice carrying no trace of suggestion. "There is a matter I wish to test." Anna blinked once, calm. Her fingers closed the phrasebook with care. Marta set down her tray too quickly, the glasses rattling faintly. Her lips pressed into a line. She did not move yet, but her entire posture leaned toward her daughter. The hall continued its quiet rhythm, but for Anna, the air felt sharper now. She had been asked to step from shadow into light. Keller's request was not one to be questioned, not in a place like this. His reputation traveled faster than his steps, and the staff moved instinctively out of his path. The air shifted as though the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. Anna rose from her stool, small and composed. She smoothed the front of her plain dress, the fabric faded from many washings. Her eyes, steady and pale, did not flicker toward the guests who had now turned discreet glances toward her. Marta moved quickly to her side. She set down her tray in the kitchen doorway and wiped her hands on her apron. Her shoulders squared as she stood between her daughter and the stairwell, her eyes fixed on Keller. "If she goes, I go," Marta said quietly. Her voice was respectful, but carried a firmness that surprised even herself. Keller regarded her for a long moment. Then he gave a small nod. Of course, a mother does not let her child walk alone. With that, he turned, leading them toward the grand staircase. The polished marble steps curved upward, lined with thick carpet of deep red. Above, a chandelier spilled light across gold-trimmed mirrors, throwing back the faces of those who climbed. Anna's shoes made the faintest sound against the steps, almost lost beneath the steady tap of Keller's cane. She climbed with calm rhythm, her mother's presence just behind her. The contrast was stark. Keller's wealth pressed into every detail. The glint of the handrail, the hush of velvet drapes, against the plain cotton of Marta's blouse and apron. On the second floor, the air was different, quieter. The scent of polished wood replaced the clatter of food and drink below. Doors stood tall on either side of the corridor, each marked with brass numbers and engraved plates. This was not a place where workers lingered. Keller stopped at a wide door and motioned them inside. The room beyond was spacious, lined with shelves of books and maps. A globe stood by the window, its surface worn smooth by many hands. The fire in the hearth gave a steady glow, turning the air warm. Anna stepped in without hesitation, her small hands folded in front of her. Her eyes moved over the shelves, the scattered papers, the instruments on the desk. She did not fidget or shrink back. She only observed, as though storing every detail quietly. Marta followed, her back straight though her hands pressed firmly against the folds of her apron. She did not belong in such a room, and she knew it. Yet she stayed close, her gaze never leaving her daughter. Keller closed the door with a soft click. He rested both hands on his cane and regarded them in silence. "You carry more than silence, child," he said at last. "Now let us see how deep that river runs." The fire popped in the hearth. Anna stood in its glow, unflinching. The request hung in the air, heavy but certain. When her Keller spoke, no one doubted he would be obeyed. Conversations in the hall dipped, as though the guests sensed a boundary being crossed. Anna rose from her seat without hurry. She closed her little phrasebook and smoothed the folds of her plain dress. Her posture was calm, her gaze steady. Marta, still holding her tray, set it down on a nearby sideboard. The glasses clinked faintly. She stepped forward, her shoulders squared. "If my daughter goes, I go too," she said. Her voice was low but firm. Keller paused, cane resting lightly against the marble floor. His eyes moved from Anna to her mother. A small nod. Yes, a mother should not let her child walk alone. He turned toward the staircase. The red-carpeted steps curved upward beneath crystal light. The chandeliers above sent fractured brightness across the mirrors, multiplying every movement. Anna followed, her small shoes tapping softly against the stone. She moved without hesitation, each step measured. Marta came close behind, her apron and blouse stark against the richness of velvet drapes and polished brass. The contrast was sharp, servant and guest, mother and daughter, all climbing together in silence. On the second floor, the air felt still. The sounds of dining and laughter faded into nothing. The corridors stretched long, lined with tall wooden doors, each marked with brass numbers. The carpets muffled their footsteps. Keller stopped before a wide door and opened it. He gestured inside. The room was spacious. Bookshelves climbed the walls, their spines worn with use. A globe stood near the window, its surface faded with age. Maps, papers, and instruments lay scattered across a heavy desk. A fire crackled steadily in the hearth, filling the air with warmth and a faint smell of oak. Anna entered first. She paused only briefly, her eyes scanning the room with quiet attention. She did not fidget. Her small hands folded in front of her as though she had been here many times before. Marta stepped in after her, holding herself tall despite the plainness of her uniform. She remained close, her gaze sharp on Keller, but her hand brushed Anna's shoulder lightly, an anchor. Keller closed the door. He stood by the fire, both hands resting on his cane. For a long moment, he said nothing. At last, his voice broke the stillness. "You carry more than silence, child." Let us see how much. The flame snapped in the hearth. Anna did not move. The fire's glow flickered across Keller's lined face as he regarded the girl. He leaned lightly on his cane, his voice measured. Tell me, he said in German, his words deliberate. How does a child of 10 speak Hungarian so cleanly? That is no trick. Anna stood still, her pale hands folded together. Her voice came soft, but steady. My grandfather taught me. He lived with us when I was small. Keller tilted his head. And where did he come from, this grandfather? Her eyes lowered for a moment, as though touching a memory. He was a teacher before the war. He kept his books, even when the rest was gone. At night, he would read to me. Not fairy tales. Words from other lands. He said it was important. The silence in the room thickened. The fire cracked once, filling the pause. Marta shifted slightly behind her daughter. Her gaze softened as she added, almost reluctantly, my father believed that language was survival. He carried that belief to his grave. Keller's brow lifted, but he said nothing. He only studied the girl more closely. Anna continued, her tone matter of fact. He would point to the maps and say, this is not just a line. Every word is a door. If you can open it, you will never be trapped. Her fingers brushed the edge of her dress, but she did not fidget. She lifted her eyes again. So I listened, and I remembered. Keller moved a step closer, the fire casting sharp shadows across the floor. His cane tapped lightly against the rug. You listened as a child listens, but you repeat as a scholar repeats. That is not common. Anna did not answer. Instead, she stood quietly, letting his words hang in the air. Marta's voice broke the silence once more. It was never meant to be a display, she said. It was only a way to hold on to something after we lost everything else. Keller's eyes flickered toward her, then back to the girl. His mouth pressed into a line, unreadable. The room held its breath, filled only with the faint hiss of the fire. Anna's story had been spoken plainly, but it left weight behind. Keller turned at last, moving toward the desk. He ran a hand across the spine of a book as though considering something left unsaid. You carry history in your voice, he said quietly. Perhaps more than you realize. The glow of the hearth deepened, casting the girl's face in light and shadow as Keller's interest rooted itself more firmly. Keller's hand lingered on the book's spine, his eyes sharp. History in your voice, he repeated softly. Then he turned, cane tapping once against the rug. But history alone is not enough. Many inherit words. Few keep them alive. Anna's gaze didn't waver. I only remembered. That is all. Marta stepped forward slightly, her hands clasped in front of her apron. Her voice carried a quiet weight. Remembering was not simple for her. Keller looked at her with a measured patience. Explain. Marta's eyes moved briefly to her daughter, then back. My father died when Anna was 6. He had already been ill for years. Those long nights when he could not sleep, he would still read aloud. Even when his voice was broken, she sat at his side and listened. When he passed, she carried the words herself. I never asked her to. She did it on her own. The room grew still. The fire popped gently, as though listening. Anna spoke again, her tone quiet but firm. After he was gone, I read his books in secret. I did not want the pages to fall silent. My mother worked too much to watch me closely, and I wanted her to rest. So I studied when the house was quiet. Her small hands rested lightly against the worn phrasebook. Sometimes the words were hard. Sometimes they hurt to say, but I thought if I spoke them, then he was not gone entirely. Marta's breath caught faintly, but she did not interrupt. A shadow of grief passed across her face, controlled but unmistakable. Keller's gaze settled on the child again. He said nothing for several moments, weighing her composure against her words. Discipline, he said finally. Discipline, where most children would choose play. Anna's eyes lowered, not in shame but in thought. Play was for other children. I only had the words. The sentence hung in the room like a quiet tolling bell. Keller turned back toward the desk, fingers brushing over papers stacked in careful disorder. His voice came low. Loss can turn the smallest things into weapons, or into tools. Which of the two will you make of it? Anna's head tilted slightly, as though she was considering the question more than the tone. She did not answer. Marta, behind her, held her silence too. Her face revealed enough. A mother who had given everything she could, and a daughter who had carried what was left. The fire burned on, steady and watchful, as though the room itself knew the conversation was only just beginning. Keller straightened, his cane pressing lightly against the rug. His gaze shifted from mother to daughter. "Words are not ornaments," he said. "They are bridges, or they are barriers. Let us see what you can build." He moved toward the door and pulled it open. The hallway outside stretched into shadow. From below drifted the faint hum of conversation, the clink of dishes, the life of the hotel. "There is a man waiting in the study down the hall," Keller said. "He is French. He has papers he insists are misunderstood. I have no time for misunderstandings. You will listen. You will tell me if his claim is truth or trick." Anna's eyes lifted, pale and steady. She did not answer quickly. Instead, she glanced once at her mother. Marta's throat tightened. She stepped close, her hand resting lightly against Anna's shoulder. "You do not have to prove yourself to anyone," she whispered. Anna looked up at her, calm. "I only have to speak what is true." The words, simple as they were, silenced Marta's protest. Slowly, she let her hand fall away. Keller waited with quiet expectation, watching the exchange. When Anna nodded once, he turned, leading the way into the corridor. The hall was hushed, the carpet swallowing the sound of their steps. Anna walked between the two adults, her small frame upright, her hands clasped before her. Her face showed no strain, but Marta could see the faint quickness of her breath, the small flutter beneath the calm. At the study door, Keller paused. He turned slightly toward Anna. "If you fail, the man will know more than you, and I will know less of you. Do you understand?" Anna met his gaze. "Yes." Marta bent down, close to her daughter's ear. Her whisper carried only to Anna. "Remember, you do not stand alone." Anna's lips moved faintly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. Keller opened the door. Inside, the study smelled of tobacco and ink. A man in a gray coat sat at a table, papers spread before him. His expression was tense, his mouth set tight as he turned toward them. Keller gestured. "This girl will hear you," he said in German. "Speak as you will." The man looked at the child, confused, then doubtful. Still, he began. His words flowed in French, smooth and insistent. Anna stepped forward, her hands still folded. She listened, her head tilting slightly. Her eyes traced the papers. She did not speak yet. She was weighing the words. The Frenchman's voice filled the study, steady but urgent. He pointed to the lines of text, his hand moving quickly over seals and signatures. His tone carried insistence, even a trace of desperation. Keller stood at the side of the room, cane resting against his leg. His sharp eyes never left Anna. The girl listened without interruption. Her breathing slowed. She leaned closer, her small hand brushing the corner of a page. She traced the signature once with her finger, then looked back to the man. When he paused for breath, she spoke. "In French," she said gently, "you claim the contract allows you access for 5 years. But the words here are not years. They are months. 5 months. Not 5 years." The man blinked. His protest faltered on his lips. Anna did not raise her voice, but each word landed clearly. "And here," she tapped a line with her fingertip. "You said the owner agreed without condition. But there is a condition. It is written plainly. A witness must approve each renewal. That witness is not here." The room went silent. The man's face reddened. He muttered something under his breath, still in French, but his eyes avoided the paper. His confidence had slipped. Keller's lips pressed into the faintest line, something between satisfaction and intrigue. Anna stepped back, folding her hands again. Her gaze remained calm, without triumph. "He has spoken what he hoped," she said softly, "but not what the words hold." For a long moment, no one moved. The fire in the grate whispered faintly. The Frenchman gathered his papers with stiff hands, muttering excuses. He would not meet Keller's eyes as he slipped past and left the room. The door clicked softly shut behind him. Keller tapped his cane against the rug once. "A bridge built," he said quietly, "and strong enough to hold weight." Anna lowered her eyes. It was only the truth. Behind her, Marta's hands had clenched tight against her apron. Now she released them slowly. Pride touched her face, but it was restrained, carried quietly. Keller studied the girl with long silence. Finally, he inclined his head. Truth spoken without hesitation. "That is rarer than you think." Anna remained still, as though she had not heard the compliment. The test was over. Yet in the hush of the study, it was clear the outcome had unsettled more than the man with papers. It had unsettled the balance of the room itself. By the time Anna and her mother returned to the main hall, the hotel had shifted. The chandeliers still glowed. The piano still played faintly from the lobby, but the air carried something new. Guests leaned closer to one another, their voices hushed but quick. At tables where business had filled the evening, words now slipped sideways toward the girl who had stepped out of silence. The waitress's child. Did you see? She corrected the man as if it were nothing. So young, yet she spoke as one trained. Strange, isn't it? The whispers moved like smoke, curling through the air. Some were curious, almost admiring. Others carried doubt, even suspicion. Anna walked beside her mother, her hands folded neatly in front of her once again. Her face showed no sign that she noticed the murmurs, though she felt the weight of eyes upon her. Marta, however, heard every fragment. She caught the sharp note of envy in one guest's whisper, the brittle laughter in another's. Pride and fear pressed together in her chest. She wanted to gather her daughter close, shield her from both the praise and the doubt. At one table, a woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. Children repeat what they overhear. That is all it was. At another, a man adjusted his spectacles. No, that was not mimicry. She read it. She understood. The divide deepened with every hushed exchange. Anna, still silent, found her stool once more. She lifted her little phrasebook and opened to a familiar page. Her lips moved faintly, tracing words with her finger, as though nothing had changed. But in truth, she felt the room tilting. She had been unseen this morning. Now she could not disappear so easily. Keller remained at his table, cane resting against the cloth. He sipped from his glass, listening without effort to the growing murmur. His eyes followed Anna as though he had expected this ripple all along. The waitstaff worked more stiffly, glancing at the girl, at Marta, at Keller. The rhythm of service had been disturbed, and though plates still moved and glasses still filled, the steadiness was gone. Marta bent close to her daughter, her voice a whisper meant only for her. Be still. Let them talk. The less you answer, the less they can twist. Anna nodded once. Her fingers traced another word on the page. The hall carried on, but its current had shifted. Admiration, suspicion, and curiosity wound together in the air, a quiet storm gathering beneath the polished chandeliers. The night deepened. Some guests drifted upstairs. Others lingered with half-empty glasses. Yet Keller did not leave. He remained at his table, still as carved stone, until at last he tapped his cane once against the floor. The sound was sharp enough to hush the nearest voices. Slowly, he rose, his tall frame casting a longer shadow across the hall. His gaze did not wander. It fixed directly on Anna. Child, he said, his voice carrying with ease, though not loudly. Step here. Anna closed her book and slid carefully from her stool. Her small shoes pressed softly against the carpet as she approached him. Marta followed, never more than a step behind. When they reached him, Keller leaned slightly forward. His eyes searched Anna's face. There was no smile, only measured respect. You have a skill, he said plainly. Not borrowed. Not rehearsed. A discipline. Do you know what that means? Anna shook her head. It only means I learned to listen. And to read. For the first time, a faint curl of humor touched Keller's lips. And how many here, with all their titles and fortunes, could have read what you read tonight? Few. Very few. The room stilled. People watched without pretending otherwise. I will tell you what it means, Keller continued. He rested one hand on his cane, the other behind his back. It means you must not be left to grow in the shadows of other men's mistakes. I would see your skill sharpened, not dulled. If you accept, I will arrange for your study. Proper instruction. Access to what you deserve. The offer hung in the air, heavier than the chandeliers above. Anna stood quiet, her brow faintly drawn. She turned her eyes to her mother before answering. Marta stepped slightly forward, her voice steady, though she gripped her apron tight. What does it cost her, Keller? Children are praised and then forgotten every day. I will not have her paraded and discarded for your amusement. Keller inclined his head slowly, as though acknowledging the strike of a blade. It will cost her nothing but time, and it is no amusement. A gift such as this, buried in silence, is a waste. I do not waste. Anna lowered her gaze, thoughtful, weighing her mother's words and Keller's. She did not answer yet. Around them, the guests leaned closer, breath caught. The weight of the choice was clear, and for the first time that evening, silence fell not from doubt, but from recognition. Morning returned with its soft light spilling through the hotel's tall windows. The grand dining hall, once alive with gossip, now felt hushed, waiting. A long table stretched across the room, its polished surface gleaming beneath the chandeliers. Usually, only men in dark suits and polished shoes sat here. Merchants, landowners, officials. Today, a child walked toward it. Anna wore a simple blue dress her mother had pressed carefully the night before. Nothing ornate, but clean, straight, dignified. She clutched her little phrase book in one hand, though she held it behind her back as if it were a secret she meant to keep. Marta followed half a step behind, dressed in the same black dress and white apron. She did not belong among the tailored jackets and fine jewelry, yet she carried herself with quiet strength, her presence a steady anchor for her daughter. At the head of the table, Keller stood waiting. His cane rested by his side, his shoulders squared. "Come," he said, motioning to an empty chair placed beside him. Not at the far end, not against the wall. Beside him, gasps whispered from the gathered guests. A child at the great table? A waitress's daughter, seated next to Keller himself? Anna paused only briefly before stepping forward. She climbed onto the chair with quiet composure, feet not quite reaching the floor. She folded her hands neatly on the table, her back straight, her eyes steady. The men and women shifted uncomfortably. Some frowned, others looked away. A few, however, leaned closer, curious, studying the little girl who seemed untouched by the weight of the moment. Keller spoke first. "Last night, she corrected a mistake that many here would not have noticed. Today, I ask you to listen, not as to a child, but as to a mind worth hearing." A man in a dark green jacket cleared his throat. "She is 10 years old. With respect, Herr Keller, what insight can?" Anna's voice cut in, calm but precise. "I am 10, yes, but I can hear what you cannot. When words shift, when meaning is bent. My mother taught me to respect silence. In silence, you hear more than most will ever speak." The hall fell still. Even her detractors leaned closer, caught by the certainty in her small voice. Marta stood just behind her, hands folded, face unreadable. But inside, her heart swelled. Her daughter had stepped into a world not meant for her, and already she held her place. The morning meal stretched on, talk circling around politics, trade, and shifting borders. It was the kind of talk Anna had only ever overheard in fragments while carrying a plate to her mother. Now she sat among it, her hands folded, her eyes moving from one face to the next. The test came sooner than anyone expected. A courier entered, hat in hand, dust on his boots. He handed Keller a folded paper, sealed and read. Keller broke the seal and read in silence. His brow tightened. Then, without a word, he laid the letter in front of Anna. "Read it aloud," Keller said. The hall shifted. Some laughed quietly, thinking it a game. Others frowned, uneasy. Marta stiffened where she stood. Her hands clenched at her apron strings, but she did not speak. Anna took the paper. The ink was heavy, the script hurried but sharp. She read it once silently, lips pressed together. Then she lifted her chin and began. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the words of a military report. A river crossing had been delayed. Supplies lost. An officer had miscalculated the depth. It was written in code-like phrasing, not for a child's mouth. Yet the words flowed clearly, her accent careful, each line without hesitation. Halfway through, Anna stopped. She frowned. One word did not fit. She read it again, then shook her head. "This is wrong," she said, placing her finger on the page. "It says reinforcement, but the mark here changes the meaning. It says retreat." The writer wanted it hidden. The laughter died. Keller leaned closer, eyes sharp, but he said nothing. The green-jacketed man from before scoffed, though his face was pale. "She guesses. Anyone can guess." "No," Anna answered calmly, still seated, still holding the page. "This stroke was changed. It is not natural. Someone tried to hide it. If you act as if reinforcements are coming, you will wait. If you act knowing it means retreat, you will move before it is too late." Her words fell into silence. Keller's hand tightened on his cane. Slowly, he rose. "You see now," he said, voice low but carrying to every corner, "why I placed her at this table." Anna set the paper down carefully, her hands folding once again in her lap. She did not smile. She only waited. Marta's eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly and straightened her shoulders. Her daughter had not faltered. She had turned pressure into proof. The hall did not return to easy chatter after Anna's reading. The words hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Men who had once dismissed her now leaned toward one another, whispering. Some avoided her gaze altogether. Keller remained standing. He tapped his cane lightly against the floor, the sound sharp and deliberate. "From this day," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "this child sits with us not as a guest, but as one whose word is to be weighed." A ripple passed through the gathering. Shock, resistance, and beneath it, something else. Respect, though some resisted showing it openly. Keller gestured to the empty chair beside him. "It will remain hers." Anna did not move. She already sat in it, small and composed, her feet still not touching the ground. But now the chair had become something more, a seat claimed, marked before all. The man in the green jacket gave a short, tight smile, but it did not reach his eyes. "We honor her," he said, almost under his breath. "We honor truth," Keller replied evenly, "no matter where it is found." Anna lowered her eyes, tracing the rim of her cup with one finger. She felt the weight of what had just happened, but did not show it. To her, it was not about the chair, nor the room of polished shoes and gleaming cufflinks. It was about being trusted to speak and not being silenced. At the far end of the hall, Marta pressed her hand against her apron. A tear had escaped down her cheek, but she quickly brushed it away, hoping no one had seen. Yet someone had. A woman seated 2 chairs down turned and looked at Marta, then nodded. Just a small, human gesture. For the first time, Marta felt seen not as a servant, but as the mother of the child who had shifted the room. The meal continued, but everything had changed. When servants passed plates, they paused near Anna, waiting as though her presence altered the rhythm. When a question was raised about a contract, one man, hesitant at first, turned toward her and asked, "What do you think, child?" She looked at him calm. "I think you already know the answer," she said quietly. And though she said no more, the man nodded, chastened, as if she had given more than enough. In the quiet that followed, it was clear. Anna's name was no longer spoken as an aside. It had become part of the room. The day wound down, the long table emptying slowly as men and women gathered their papers and coats. The golden light of late afternoon spilled across the hall, softening the hard edges of the morning's debates. Anna sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, her chair now strangely heavy with meaning. When the last of the louder voices faded, smaller ones emerged. Not everyone left in silence. A man with thinning gray hair lingered, adjusting his cufflinks more than necessary. At last, he approached Anna. His steps were slow, almost uncertain. "My father," he began, his voice low, "was born in Prussia. He tried to teach me the language when I was a boy. I never listened. Today, hearing you speak, I was reminded of him. Thank you." He did not wait for an answer. He bowed slightly, then turned and left. Anna's eyes followed him until the door closed. She had not expected gratitude. Her hand curled gently around the edge of her chair, grounding herself. A woman in a violet dress stopped next. She bent close so only Anna and Marta could hear. "My son struggles at school. They say he is slow, but perhaps he simply needs someone patient. Seeing you today, I believe in him again. Do not forget this gift of yours. It carries further than you think." Anna blinked, surprised again. She had only spoken truth, yet it seemed to ripple outward, touching places she could not see. When the hall was nearly empty, Marta was approached too. A younger servant, balancing a tray, whispered quickly as he passed, "Your daughter makes us proud. She shows what people like us can be." He hurried on, but the words struck deep. Marta's throat tightened. She did not answer him, but when Anna looked up, she saw her mother's hand resting briefly against her chest, as if steadying a heartbeat. Keller was the last to leave. He said nothing at first, only placed his cane on the floor beside Anna's chair. "Gratitude will come in many shapes," he said at last, his tone even. "Some will speak it, some will not. Do not measure your worth by their noise." He collected his cane, nodded once, and departed. The hall grew quiet, emptied of voices and echoing only with the faint creak of old wood. Anna sat still, Marta beside her, both aware that something had shifted again. The world beyond these walls might not yet know it, but inside, gratitude had begun to flow like a quiet current. Evening shadows lengthened as Anna and Marta prepared to leave. They had gathered their coats when the echo of measured footsteps returned to the hall. The man in the green jacket, the one who had smiled without warmth, had not gone. He stood near the doorway, blocking their path. His expression was sharp, almost cutting. "So this is what we are now," he said slowly. "Taking counsel from children?" Anna did not flinch. She tightened her grip on the small leather notebook Keller had given her to hold during the reading. "I only answered when asked," she said quietly. The man tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "And you think yourself equal to men who have studied and bled for decades?" Marta shifted, stepping slightly in front of her daughter. Her jaw was set, but she did not speak. She understood this moment belonged to Anna. Anna's voice was steady. "No, I am not equal in years. But words are not older because of who speaks them. They are true, or they are not." The man's lips pressed thin. "Clever," he muttered. "But words alone build nothing. They change nothing." Anna lifted her eyes fully to his. "Then why are you here, stopping me, still speaking of them?" Silence stretched. For a heartbeat, even Marta felt her breath catch. The child's calm refusal to bend unsettled the man more than defiance ever could. His voice hardened. "You do not belong at this table. You will see soon enough how little patience the world has for games." Anna held the notebook closer to her chest. "I do not play games," she replied. "I listen, I remember, and I speak when needed." The man hesitated, his authority cracked. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Marta finally stepped forward, her tone firm but measured. "We have taken enough of your time, sir. Allow us to pass." He moved aside after a pause, though the tension lingered in his shoulders. As they walked past, he said under his breath, "The higher you rise, the harder the fall." Anna heard him. She did not answer. Her silence carried more weight than words could. The door closed behind them, sealing the confrontation inside. But Marta could feel it. This would not be the last test. Outside, the evening air was cool, almost cleansing. Yet Anna's composure told her mother that the real storm still waited ahead. The night was meant to end quietly, but the man in the green jacket did not leave matters to chance. Before Anna and Marta could depart, a messenger hurried down the steps, out of breath. He whispered urgently to Keller, who had reappeared at the top of the staircase. Keller's brow furrowed. "Stay," he instructed. His voice carried authority that silenced the gathering remnants of the hall. "There is a document in the archive. Misfiled. A contract, old but binding. We need it read correctly, tonight." The man in the green jacket seized the moment. "There," he said sharply, pointing toward Anna. "Let the child prove herself. If her tongue is so gifted, let her untangle the record. Or shall we trust rumor more than reason?" The crowd murmured, torn between intrigue and doubt. Marta's hand brushed against Anna's sleeve, a silent tether. Anna met her mother's eyes briefly, then nodded once. They were led into a smaller chamber, lined with shelves that smelled of dust and time. A parchment lay unfolded on the table, edges brittle with age. Handwritten, its script looped and twisted in strokes difficult to follow. Anna leaned closer. The ink was faded, the dialect old-fashioned. She traced the words silently with her eyes, lips unmoving. The silence grew heavy. At last, she spoke, her voice steady and clear. "This is no contract of debt, as claimed. It is a land grant, conditional. The family retains rights unless abandoned for 3 consecutive years. That has not happened." Gasps circled the room. A steward leaned in, verifying her translation against notes no one else had dared attempt. His face paled. "She is correct." The man in the green jacket stiffened. His jaw worked as though grinding stone. "Impossible," he whispered. Keller's cane tapped once against the floor. "Not impossible. Proven. By a child you sought to belittle." Anna stepped back, her composure unshaken, though her small hands trembled slightly against her dress. She said nothing more. She had no need. The silence after her words was louder than any triumph. Marta exhaled slowly, her heart pounding with pride and relief. She had watched her daughter step into the fire and return untouched. The crowd's perception shifted in that moment. Skepticism gave way to awe, doubt to quiet acknowledgement. Even those who resisted knew they had seen something undeniable. When Anna and her mother left the chamber, the corridor outside felt different. The air was charged, not with hostility, but with the weight of recognition earned. And recognition could not be taken back. The hall was quieter now. Many had left, But those who remained gathered near the fire, their faces drawn with thought. Anna stood at the edge of the room, small among them, yet every eye seemed to rest on her. Keller, leaning on his cane, gestured toward her. "Tell them," he said simply. "They need to hear from you." Anna hesitated. She was only 10. Her mother's presence behind her was steady, but she felt the weight of the room pressing forward. She clasped her hands before her, drawing strength from the silence. "I didn't come here to prove anything," she said softly. Her voice carried farther than she expected. "My mother works. I sit quietly. We are noticed only when we are in the way. But words matter. If you speak them wrongly, they can take something that is not theirs. If you hear them rightly, they give back what was lost." The group shifted, some nodding faintly. The man in the green jacket turned his face, but not in denial, rather in discomfort. "I am not special," Anna continued. "I was taught to listen, to be careful, to respect what others ignore. That is all." She paused. "But sometimes, what is ignored holds the truth." Silence lingered after her words, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Keller's eyes glistened faintly in the dim light, though his voice remained steady. "Out of the mouths of the overlooked," he said, "truth often arrives." Marta, standing just behind her daughter, let her hand rest gently on Anna's shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The lesson had already been carried across the room, plain and undeniable. And with that, the evening shifted into something deeper, something remembered. The night had emptied. The once crowded hall now echoed with only the soft sweep of brooms and the low creak of lanterns being dimmed. Outside, the air was sharp and cool, carrying the scent of rain that had fallen earlier. Anna walked beside her mother in silence. Marta's apron was still creased, the scent of bread and spilled coffee clinging to it. Anna's dress was plain, its hem brushing her shoes, but her step was steady. For the first time, she did not feel like just the waitress's child. They stopped beneath a chestnut tree by the square. The branches arched over them, leaves stirring gently in the wind. Marta knelt, so her eyes were level with her daughter's. For a moment, she only looked at her, searching, remembering, perhaps seeing both the small child she had raised and the strength that now stood before her. Without a word, Anna reached into her pocket. She pulled out the folded slip of paper Keller had given her earlier, a small note of thanks, written in his careful hand. She held it out to her mother. "It belongs to you too," Anna said quietly. Marta took it, pressing it to her chest. Then, with a soft smile, she placed her arm around her daughter's shoulders. No speeches, no promises. Just a long embrace beneath the dim lantern light. The street around them was empty, but something fuller remained in the air. The knowledge that dignity could not be stolen, that truth could rise even from a quiet child no one had expected to speak. Together, they walked home. And though no one watched, each step carried the weight of a story that would not be forgotten. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive stories.